There we go. Okay. That did not. All right. So let me try sharing my screen one more time. There we go. Okay. Okay. Are we seeing the title slide again?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Okay. Sorry, my computer was doing something weird. Okay, so thank you all very much for joining us today, and thank you all for your patience. Um, and thank you all for your interest in what's going on with Massachusetts Public Libraries. We hope that we'll be able to offer you some advice and some information today that will help you get your message about whatever is going on in your library out to as many people as possible and also provide you sort of a broader perspective of what is going on with Massachusetts libraries right now so that you have an idea of where you fit in the larger library landscape outside of your municipality and across the state. So I am here today with Kate Merlin, the head of state programs, Jen Inglis, our state aid specialist, and Rob Favini, our dearly departing um, head of library advisory and development and our current government liaison. So, at the end, all of you can join us in wishing him a very happy retirement as of tomorrow. Um, so, what we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about what library budgets and budgets just in general across the state are looking at, some of the pressures that have been put on municipalities right now. We're going to talk about what it means to be a certified library, because unfortunately that is coming up quite a bit. We're going to talk about communicating your library's value as effectively and also as legally as you possibly can. We will absolutely be providing you with resources. That will include a resource packet, the recording of this presentation, and it will also include the slides as well. Um, we will leave ample time for questions, and we will stop the recording when the question and answer period starts to make sure that people feel as comfortable as possible speaking up. Um, but again, when we send out the resources, we will try to make sure that they cover what has been asked in the question. If you drop some things in the chat, we can also share that after it's been anonymized. So just to remind everybody, one of the best ways to keep up with what's going on with libraries across the state is through our website. I have the link up there. Apologies to people who are using any screen recordings to watch or view the slides. The, best practice is to include a link as opposed to the text of the website itself, but I don't always trust that it will link over an image. So I wanted to make sure that was there. And our usual disclaimer, none of us are lawyers, none of us have ever played one on TV, to my knowledge. So we are not a governing agency. We are not an oversight agent, I'm sorry, an enforcement agency. So the guidance that we are going to give you here is information that is up to date and correct to the best of our knowledge, but it is intended to provide guidance and it is not going to constitute legal advice. Although we will be giving you some opportunities and resources where you will be able to find that legal advice. And with that, I will hand it over to Rob.
Thanks, Al. gonna start out by bumming everybody out for a while.
Yeah,
We're,
thanks.
we're gonna start low, then we're gonna rise it up towards the end, and we're gonna have some tools and things to do. Well, Al, you lost the there you
There
go.
we go. Are we back?
Yep. If you can back one up, oh, the other way.
I would love to. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So this is kind of like literally a 30-second dive into recent headlines. I think this is really the year of the override. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's causing this general um, uh, uh, climate in Massachusetts that will be impacting municipal finances and by extension impacting library finances as well. We're earlier today, we're talking to the presentation team, and unfortunately, I don't have a stat of how many overrides are currently either in the works, talked about, or planned for this fiscal year. Last year, there were roughly around 22, I think, that we were aware of. This year, there are going to be quite a bit more. But let's talk a little bit about what is kind of gut municipalities in this state. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to push a resource for folks. The Massachusetts Municipal Association back in last December published something called The Perfect Storm. Cities and towns face historic pressures. This will be linked to in the resource guide that we send out. And it's a great kind of like bulleted capsulation of the many things that are impacting municipal finances right now. And if we go to the next slide, I'll kind of just uh, give you an overview of what they are. Um, Basically, we see four things happening. One is rising costs and sluggish aid putting pressure on local budgets across Massachusetts. The general theme is that either they have an unexpected expense or they didn't budget for an expense and they didn't have the money that they thought they would have in their coffers. One of the big ones that a lot of folks are talking about is unrestricted aid, which really bottomed out the last economic recession back in 2009, 10, and 11. Uh, since that time, it really has not come back to what it was pre-recession. And so it's really down 24% in real dollars. Another thing that you'll be hearing a lot about is Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 is about 35 years old now, and it restricts how much towns can raise their property taxes relative to their income. And that is a model that has really been really forcing a lot of local municipalities to come up short in their revenues. And then finally, what we've been hearing are rising costs. The big ones we've been hearing are health insurance and schools, and if there was a construction project happening in the town, the price of the materials have gone up so much that it outstrips what the money that they had budgeted for it. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you an idea of what else is happening, other than in addition to those kind of like revenue hitting problems, municipalities had deferred a lot of maintenance in many cases, and that's come due where now they have projects that they can't avoid do they cannot put off any longer. Just the general cost of living has outstripped their ability to raise revenues. And this is everything from energy, climate mitigation, cyber attack assurance, and whatever else breaks on Tuesday, which we've been hearing a lot of on. I mean, even things like uh, our dump is closing because we've hit capacity, so we're going to have to outsource our trash, things like that. Also in the air is Massachusetts having a net loss population in the tech sector jobs. So the general economy of Massachusetts is expected to soften a little bit. And surprisingly, municipalities were using ARPA money. Remember ARPA? Do you remember a few years back there was this thing called the pandemic? Well, the federal government pumped a lot of money into local municipalities with a long range spend down, and we've hit that point. So a lot of the ARPA money kind of covered some of the holes that were in local municipal budgets. Next slide, please. So kind to arm you, get in your minds what the discussions are going to be. Again, And then they came up with a follow-up, navigating the storm, charting a course towards financial stability. And they talk about these three key things that will be in discussion on state level and in municipalities. And that is, again, getting that direct state aid up to real dollars to match what the needs are. Um, Property taxation flexibility, that's reworking Prop 2.5. And realizing that something has to be done with that formula, giving a city's ability to raise more money. And then finally, effort to modernize and automate certain municipal financial practices to make things a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more efficient. So next slide over, kind of get you into kind of a mindset that y'all really have to be into. I think one of them is to really start thinking it as a municipal department. I know a lot of folks I talk to, they talk to town hall or city hall as some other entity that they have to deal with. But in reality, the library is part of the municipal offering. So really getting in there and keeping alert and being engaged with the municipal folks is going to be crucial. The other thing is to get your library story out. Really know what we're going to be talking a little bit about this later on. Know the value of your library to your community and keep telling it to everyone. And in that effort, enlist trustees and friends. They are the great go-to and have flexibility to talk to folks and be out in the community as community leaders. And remember, in all this story, you are part of the solution, not the problem. We're going to talk later on about some of the realities of funding and the return on investment to a municipality. That you're actually there solving a lot of problems, not being a problem, and keep that mindset. And finally, at some point, you're going to have to assemble the library mob. Time and time again, we've seen with overrides that one of the most impactful things is to get your supporters out to town meeting, out to city council meetings, so they know that there is a loud voice out there. And if you don't have a library mob right now, start working on getting one. Again, time and time again, this is very effective if the municipal officials are going to town meeting and they're surrounded on both sides of the street by folks being very supportive of the library, if you're singled out by an override. So having that, it's getting a little more upbeat, and let's try to keep that going. And we'll turn it over to Al.
All right. I don't think we're quite at the upbeat part yet, but a little bit more information on why focusing on your presence in your municipality and why it's so important to remain and become an active part of your municipality's ecosystem is that on average, about 90% of a library's budget is funded from its municipality. So that means all of your operating, staffing, collection funds are coming from your city or town. Your library will likely get state aid, and your library staff may earn extra grants for programming, but when it comes to how your library is existing and surviving on that day-to-day basis, that funding is coming from your municipality. And it's the local officials that are setting that budget. So the town mayor, the town manager, the mayor, the city council, the financial committee, however your local government structures the budget process, your elected neighbors are the ones making the decision on how much your library is going to get in order to be able to function. They're going to take a look at what the city or town gets as a whole and then divvy it up through all of the municipal departments that they have to deal with. So whatever percentage of that budget that your library gets is what's going to determine how many people are going to be able to staff the building, what your services are going to look like, how many days and hours your library is going to be able to be open each week, what kind of money you're going to have to spend on collections. And increasingly, as many of you already know, this isn't just books and DVDs. We're talking about electronic collections, libraries of things, and in some, but not all cases, programming. There are still plenty of libraries who don't actually have a budget line item for programming from their municipal budget, and they rely solely on alternative funding sources like friends, foundations, and state aid to bring their programming to the library. So, since I have brought state aid into the discussion, I will pass this on to Kate.
Thank you, Al. That was a good segue there. Um, for those of you who don't know me, which is probably not many of you, my name is Kate Merlin. I'm the head of state programs at the NBLC, so I really oversee state aid to public libraries and state certification. With me today is Jen Inglis. Give a wave, Jen. She also works on state aid and ARIS and all of the fun reporting you guys are going to have to do soon. So one of the most valuable um, things that well, I'm a little bit biased about what the NBLC does, but one of the most valuable things that we do, I think, is offer the state aid to public library certification program, which the benefits of state aid, I think we all know are incredibly important to our residents and to our municipalities. But we also know that the state of municipal finance, it affects the state of your budget, which then affects your certification status. Our certification program, as it says there, protects library budgets by requiring the municipalities modestly increase your funding in exchange for certification and its benefits. And then, as a lot of us know, as we've gone through budget crises in the past, the risk of decertification due to those budget cuts can be a powerful and effective argument or threat that can be used to change minds and save an otherwise threatened library budget. So the State Aid to Public Libraries program, there's the benefits to it, the benefits of certification, the funding that comes from it, but also really useful argument and threat that you can use against the town if your budget is under threat. Next slide, please. Thank you. And most of you know all of this, but just the basics of certification, meeting the municipal appropriation requirement, the MAR, meeting the other requirements and standards. But overall, the budget increase requirement that we have every year for you and for your municipalities is on average about a 1% bump every year, which is not a lot. That technically is a shrink still if we look at the cost of inflation, the cost of healthcare and everything. I see a lot of library budgets these days where um, the salaries are going up, which is great, but because their budgets are pretty much stable, that means operational stuff is going down, or otherwise, operational stuff is going up, but then their salaries have to stay pretty much stable, because 1% growth every year does not keep up with the cost of inflation. But to us, to us, that's a big deal to get that 1% bump every year to become certified. To municipalities, um, that is not a lot of money, and yet we all see that be that little bit of money or more that is under attack and taken away a lot. Like they're trying to balance the town's budget on the back of, like coins in the back of a sofa, essentially, is what it equals out to sometimes. That small 1% increase can be the difference, as we all know, between being a certified municipality, as all of you are, I think, and being an uncertified municipality. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, certification, this is the argument that a lot of libraries have a lot of success using to advocate for their budgets. You receive state aid funds. The most important thing that's the best argument, I think, a lot of the time is the statewide reciprocal borrowing that we all get when our municipalities are certified. We get access to over 6 million items from all the libraries in the Commonwealth. That's the part that is the strongest argument for certification, and that modest budget bump every year is that if you lose certification, you become, as one library is saying right now, the phrase you're using is an information island. If you can go to the next slide. If you're not certified, you retain access to your own collection if you are still open. If your library closes because of a devastating budget cut, there is no collection that your residents have access to, and resources through the BPL and statewide research databases. But your residents and municipalities, as we all know, lose access to the grants, the state aid grant funding, and most importantly, the statewide reciprocal borrowing. That's a great typo I did though. Sorry about that. We sent out an unofficial poll last year and then had it as an ARIS question this past year as well, asking about what libraries do when a neighboring municipality is not certified. Our regulations and state law require that if you are certified, you lend to all of their certified. If you that every library that is certified, phrase that better for me, Jen.
That you allow residents of certified municipalities to
Thank you.
borrow resources from your library.
Thank you. So anybody that's certified, you have to give them full access to your resources and your ILLs and your collections. That means that if somebody next to you or near to you is not certified, becomes decertified due to closing or a huge or horrible budget cut, that they lose certification from our commissioners, you do not have to lend to them anymore. We found this, well, Rob found this amazing document as he was closing out his files from 19 FY90, which happened to be the first year that Prop 2.5 was going into effect, which was really interesting because it's a memo from the MBLC, I guess, to the state saying that this is the first year FY90 that Prop 2.5 is in effect, and so we're seeing huge budget limitations across the state, which is kind of funny to read that on the other side of it now. And it's going to be affecting a lot of libraries. And at that point, the State Aid to Public Libraries program had been around for about 3 years, since the late 80s. But in this memo for FY90 is when they stated that the commissioners voted in that June 1990 meeting that any library that is decertified through a huge budget cut or closure, people do not have to, certified libraries do not have to lend to them anymore. And that, I think, was a big moment in public libraries in Massachusetts, because the commissioners made a statement. See if I can find it. I do have it right here. It's a beautiful 1990, if you can see it. You can't see it, like mimeographed yellowing paper document, typewriter paper. And they say, they explain why borrowing privileges are a really important part of the certification program. So if your neighboring town becomes decertified, we all know as librarians, it's really hard to say no to somebody, and we want to give people access to things. But the important part of this program is that it's reciprocal borrowing. So towns are helping each other out. And so this statement from 1990 says, if one of those communities does not support its library and thereby forces it to close, the reciprocal relationship between those communities no longer exists. The result is that one community would be paying to operate its library for the benefit of residents of another community that does not do the same, which is a really great way to sum up why the local decision that every trustee board must make whether or not to serve residents of decertified communities really is important, because it affects the health of the whole ecosystem of state certification. So because most libraries have reported to us through this unofficial survey and through ARIS that they do not serve residents of decertified communities, or they were in the midst of like, oh, we should probably have a policy for that, and they're working on that. It's the most dramatic part of the state certification program that is the most dramatic argument you can use against your towns if you are facing a devastating budget cut. Because no town wants to be, well, you can see there on the screen, only 4 of 351 municipalities in the state are not certified. And those 4 municipalities, one doesn't have a library and the other 3 have a library that's open like 2 hours a month or something. So they're not part of the program. Their residents do not have statewide library cards. They do not get access to statewide reciprocal borrowing. So that's the most the most dramatic argument from my point of view that you can make for your budget, that reciprocal borrowing really matters and people really hate the idea of losing access. Did you want to say anything to that, Jen? Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how we can help if you are facing budget cuts. Al's going to go into more like how you can help, what you can do as a library administration, trustee, friends, or foundation to inform and advocate for your budget. But on our side, what we can do to help is offer the MAR waiver application process, which again, many of you are familiar with. It basically is a process by which if you do not receive the required funding from your municipality, you apply for a waiver of that funding requirement for the year. Paperwork to fill out, letters to write, presentations to make. But the end result is that most waivers, vast majority of waivers, do get approved by the Board of Library Commissioners, who are in the business of certifying libraries. They do not want to decertify a municipality because of a budget cut, but sometimes it is necessary. The last time we had a library decertified because of a budget cut was FY19, and I think it's because the budget cut that year was something like 68 or 69%. Which was an obvious message to the board that that town was not at all supporting its library, not even trying to support its library. You can see the numbers here, FY23 through today, not many waivers at all, which is really great. It's kind of fluctuated a little, but been pretty stable the last couple years. The high point was FY11, when there were 123 waivers granted. And back then we did not have the 5-year waiver policy, which I think we're only on our 5th year of it now. Back then, libraries could get waivers forever, which made it harder and harder for a town to actually get out of that MAR um, hole by basically to get back up to snuff at the end. So since that policy went into effect, towns have been a lot better about funding their libraries on our calendar. Um, but waivers are not a punishment. They are a tedious application, but to they're there as an acknowledgement of your municipality's fiscal hardship. And then it's also kind of a commissioner's vote of confidence that they know the town is trying to support the library. Maybe they can't this year due to some, fiscal circumstances, but they believe that the town is doing the best it can and it will do better in the future. Side aside, if you find yourself in any sort of budget crises or even a couple percent or not making them are, but still growing a little bit, anything that is concerning to you, please reach out to Jen and myself as soon as possible so we can meet with you and talk to you and go over some strategies with you and consequences and processes and stuff. Next slide, please. And then it's back to you, Al.
There we go. So the landscape Rob talked about is not great and not overly encouraging. And I know Kate and Jen are working with many libraries who are definitely feeling the pressure from their municipalities. If your library isn't currently having a tough time, you very likely know one or maybe even more than one library that is. But wherever you are in your budget situation, there are actions that you can take even as soon as today to prepare yourself, your community, and your advocates. So while you're thinking about that, here's a few things that you can keep in mind. You want to have a solid understanding of where your library is in the budget landscape of your municipality. Are you above or below the state average, which I will be giving you momentarily? Has your budget increased beyond the state certification requirements, or have you had to fight to ensure that you are meeting those requirements like the MAR? Never forget what your library gives to its community. Your services are of value and they are not technically free. You are a taxpayer-funded public good. And boy, do libraries know how to stretch a tax dollar. And that's something that can absolutely work in your favor and something that you should be telling as many people as you possibly can. You also want to make sure you have a good understanding of the different ways and the different people with whom you can share your stories. And if you're not sure, ask. We will absolutely be providing you with resources that can guide you into what you can say, and how much information you can put out there and how you are able to put it out there. And always remember that you're not alone. Most libraries have been in situations like this at some point. Reach out. We at the MBLC are absolutely here to help you. And if you are comfortable and if they are comfortable, we can put you in touch with others who can help as well. So never forget that you don't have to face any kind of budget pressure that you're going through on your own. So if you're going to have an understanding of where you are in the budget landscape, there we go. Here is a picture of where libraries are on average across the state. So that, and I don't know if my mouse will show up here, but that little teeny tiny purple dollar sign amid that sea of teal dollar signs. Libraries are living on that $1 sign. On average, libraries take about 1.24% of the general overall municipal general fund. To put that another way, municipalities are dedicating about 1.25% of their financial resources to their public library. Now, if you have not already been introduced to the municipal pie, allow me to do that for you now. The link to this site will be included in the resources that we'll be sharing with you. You can also access it from the library statistics site on the MBLC website. This teeny tiny little dark blue sliver, again, I don't know if my mouse is going to pop up here, but that little tiny dark blue sliver on this colorful circle is where libraries are falling on this chart. If you pull up this website, you can toggle to see specifically what your municipality is, what your little teeny tiny slice of municipal pie is. You can toggle to the drop down menu for the town and the fiscal year and figure that out. And they go back a good number of years, so you can actually see how that's changed over time. I don't expect that our little teeny tiny slice of the municipal pie will change by any significant level at any point. Your best efforts to boost your library's profile aren't going to suddenly make your slice as significant as one of the bigger neighboring slices. But that doesn't mean that the budget that you get isn't still worthwhile, and what you do with that small budget is really pretty remarkable. I don't think, at least I hope, it's not a big secret that libraries are a fantastic return on the tax dollars that are invested into them. But to give you a concrete example, a spreadsheet and I did the average return on investment for libraries across the state based on the average budget that libraries get. And on average, libraries have a 300% return on investment. So that means for every tax dollar that's getting invested in a municipality's library, libraries are putting out $3 worth of value in the services that we're providing. And this is a very conservative calculation, by the way. So I base this on the ARIS information that Jen and Kate very dutifully collect from all of you every year. But your individual library is very likely going to have services that aren't necessarily something that the ARIS can easily quantify. But you can quantify them if you keep your own set of statistics and plug them into the return on investment calculator. And yes, the link to that will also be included in the resources that we give you. So, for example, I was actually working with somebody not that long ago. Their library participates and pays for Hoopla. So they put their Hoopla stats into the ebook and audiobook checkout part of the ROI calculator. They also purchase Canopy. Their Canopy stats were put into the movie rentals. The ROI covers internet usage. But right now, the ARIS is only collecting public computers. So if you add your Wi-Fi usage into that internet usage, you're getting a much fuller picture of the value that you are providing to your community for that tiny tax dollar investment. I will put in the caveat to make sure that you are being as transparent and upfront about your calculations that you are providing. This is not adding those statistics that ARIS doesn't provide, isn't cooking the books. That is creating a fuller picture of what you are already doing, and you are going to end up with a very powerful number to share for people who might not otherwise have a really solid understanding of what libraries can offer their communities. So we also get a lot of questions about what libraries can and can't do. In some of the trustee orientations that I've done, I've talked about like big A advocacy, which is really kind of off limits for state or municipal employees, versus little A advocacy, which just means talking up your library and giving them information about what you do. I think the better way of putting this was just recently mentioned to us by the Office of Campaign and Political Finance versus you are able to inform, but you are not able to influence. So if you are in library administration, There's a lot that goes under that umbrella of what you can inform people of. You can inform them of what your library is giving to its community, how your library may be affected if you are expecting cuts, the data that you send to ARIS and your other usage statistics. That is all information that you can absolutely share with your community, with your municipal officials. You want to make sure that you're working with your board of trustees to let them know you are going to be the board's best source of your library's value and your library's operations. So you want to make sure that they have a really good idea of what you are doing so that they can then take that information and clearly message that in their roles as public officials. Keep your staff updated too, because they're going to be the ones on the front lines. They're going to need to know what they can and can't say to patrons who are like, "Hey, I heard this big thing was happening at town meeting. What do I do? What do you have to say about that?" As long as you are using passive methods to give this information out to people, you should be okay. I will caveat this with the following: do is consult a lawyer, and we will give you resources for that. The Office of Campaign and Political Finance, they are great to work with, and they will be able to give you definitive legal information about that. But if you happen to have information on a bulletin board, on your website, a stack of informational papers sitting on the checkout desk that people can choose to go and pick up for themselves, generally speaking, that's okay. Where you start to come into the category of influence, which as a municipal employee, you're not really allowed to do. If you are putting items into people's hands, so if you are telling your staff, you know, I've got this great infographic about our library statistics and our return on investment. Can you put this in every book that we check out? That is a hard line no, and we did get that directly from the Office of Campaign Finance. Keep your personal opinions as neutral as possible. You are obviously going to have very strong opinions about what is going on with your library, but you're not necessarily ethically able to share that with the people who are coming to your library. And you're not really allowed to encourage action. So go vote this way on, at town meeting or something like that. You want to keep it to informational, and make sure you're not actually telling people to go out and do the thing. I will let you
Can I jump in
know.
for a second? Can I jump in for a second, Elle?
Absolutely.
Thanks. So this information mostly pertains specifically to like override questions that are going to be voted
Mm,
on a ballot. It's the situations are slightly different. If it's just like a random June and your budget's passed, whatever, you can obviously actively put ROI bookmarks in everybody's book. This is very specifically pertaining to, in particular, override votes, because hence Office of Campaign and Political Finance, we're talking about like a ballot campaign, right? To vote yes or no on an override. Rules are different and a little bit more relaxed if it's just for like approving budgets at town meeting. And Al will get into more of this, like who to talk to about the very specific things. And in terms of the passive dissemination of information, think of it as like if you were to look for information about the library, where could you expect to normally find that information? You could expect to find it on their website, on their Facebook page, in the library, on a flyer. Whenever you are thinking of posting information for town meeting or for override or for any budgety stuff, technical term, think of it as where would a normal person reasonably expect to go to find the information. The kind of bulletin board-esque idea, but that it applies to social media and to your website and to flyers within the library too. But I will go more into the details of who to talk to about what budget situation you're in to get legal advice, because they will give you, like, as he put it, a binding legal opinion on whether a flyer you want to disseminate at town meeting or whatever is legally able to be disseminated, or if your website you put up for FAQs about your override budget situation is legally following campaign finance laws or not. So it can get kind of serious. So please talk to experts who are who are like legally trained and state attorneys in this matter. That's my one call out there. Talk to attorneys. That's it.
Yes. Thank you. No, that's a really important distinction, and I'm glad you added that. Um, so if you are where did my mouse go? Will that work? Nope. There we go. If you are a library trustee, um, what you are able to do, you are still, you have a little bit more freedom here. You still want to keep things to inform versus influence as best you can. Absolutely work with your library director. They are your direct line to library operations. They are going to know how the library is going to be affected, under what circumstances, and they'll be the best ones to communicate that information to you. And they'll also be able to help you sort of package that information so that you can go out and talk to your community about it. Um, Activate your friends group, get them talking about it, as long as you are not deliberating. If you, as an individual trustee, talk to a friend of the library and say, hey, here's what we're going through right now, um, you're not violating open meeting law or anything like that. Although, if you ever have a question about that, contact the Division of Local Government. Their information will be in the resources that we give you. They are also a fantastic and very helpful and open resource. And as always, make sure you consult a lawyer, either among the resources that we give you, or if you happen to know somebody who has expertise in that legal area. Make sure that you keep in mind that the board speaks as one voice. You may not like the restrictions that are put on you as a public official. You may have very, very strong, passionate opinions about how much you love your library, but you can't stray from the board's message that you are giving out. Try again to keep your personal opinions within that of what the board is disseminating. Um, and try to keep from crossing boundaries between a public official and a private citizen. So, as a private citizen, if there is an override and your town gets together a PAC that is helping people go out and convince people to vote a certain way that will help the library, as a private citizen, you can absolutely donate your private funds to that PAC. Just make sure you're not reaching into the board's treasury coffers to make that donation. So keep in mind where your private citizen hat is and where your public official hat is. And the resources that we give you will absolutely help you with that. Oops, let me go back. There we go. So if you are a friend of the library, if you're a foundation, if you basically if you are a nonprofit, and for some of you this actually applies to library boards as well. Nonprofits are private, independent organizations. You may be inextricably linked to the library by the purpose of your existence, but you are still your own registered private entity, which means you have a little bit more leeway than the trustees and library staff would have. You can actually encourage people to go out there and help out your library. You can take a more active role in that PAC that's helping people go through and vote in a way that will help the library in that override. So you want to make sure that you work with your library to make sure that your messaging is consistent with what the library is putting out, and you've got all your ducks in a row and you've got all your information correct. But you can go far and wide to get the word out and help people understand what's going on. You can explain what it's going to take to save your library, help your library, grow your library, whatever your particular situation happens to be. And I still will always recommend that you consult a lawyer. There are different lawyers to be able to help nonprofits for that. And yes, information in the resources packet. You, as a registered nonprofit, you will have some limits on being able to lobby, but you can lobby. You just need to make sure that you report your lobbying activities to the state, and you want to make sure you don't go over the limits that you are allowed. I believe it's the Secretary of the Commonwealth that'll have more information about that. And yes, link in resources. And make sure that when you are speaking as a friend of the library, a board member on the foundation. Make sure that it is clear that you are not speaking on behalf of the library administration or you are speaking on behalf of the board. You are speaking on behalf of yourself and your nonprofit organization that has worked closely with the board and library administration to get the information to the people that need it the most. So some of our favorite state agencies that you can get help and more binding legal advice, including as far as I can tell, they will be happy to look at your little infographic slip of paper, work with you on whatever. They are there to help make sure that you don't get in trouble. They're not trying to restrict your movements. They want to make sure that you can move forward in the most legal and ethical way possible. So, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, they will be happy to review those materials for you.
I'm
They
sorry.
will give you, oh,
I don't see the next slide.
oh, I'm sorry. Are
There
we
we
there
go.
now?
Thank you.
There
Yep.
we go. Um, The OCPF will give you a legal binding ruling. They have lawyers on call, they have a hotline, they will be able to help you. You may also want to check with the State Ethics Commission because they may have a different take onto a message that you are about to send out there. If at all possible, check with both. It can't hurt. There are some other state resources if you are a public official and you're concerned about open meeting law considerations. Contact the Division of Open Government. If you are a nonprofit or if you are in any of the scenarios that we just talked about, the Massachusetts Bar Association does have a dial a lawyer hotline. They get busy. I don't know how timely that response will be, but it is a resource that's available to you.
Al, I
Um,
just want to interrupt. I
yes,
mentioned in the chat that OCPF and the State Ethics Commission know about this webinar, and they are already getting
that's
calls
right.
from library directors and trustees and friends, so that's great.
Oh,
And we just
fantastic.
gave them a heads up that they might be getting more. So feel free to use these
Yes.
resources. They're so helpful.
Yes, and the OCPF again is primarily, well, it's really only if you're facing an actual ballot question that people have to vote on. It's not for um town meeting just approving a normal budget or like arguing for your budget in a normal budget cycle. This is just for people who are dealing with ballot questions, with voting yes or no on, not like not the point of, we're going to vote at town meeting whether to put the the override on the ballot. It's that next step. Like the override is on the ballot, it's a yes or no question. That's when you want to go to OCPF. And there's a phone number and also an email address. You can email them questions, documents, and they will go over that for you. State Ethics Commission is really fabulous. It's there's a hotline and also an online form you can fill out, and it's all anonymous. So they don't keep record. They keep records to like, be able to cross check between people to make sure people are giving the same advice and everything. But they keep all requests anonymous and they don't share that information publicly at all. So you can go to them with any concern you have about, what flyer you can make with library money, but also any ethics commissions or concerns you're having with, conflict of interest or nepotism or anything within your town as well. Most of you probably hopefully go through the yearly ethics training. I know that when I did it as a library director, it all seemed kind of like something that wasn't really available to me to use, but they're very available. The one thing as a caveat, they will not answer questions on behalf of someone else. So frequently Jen and I wish that we could ask a question on behalf of a library director, but they won't do that. They will only answer the question to they will only answer to the person who actually is having the issue or having the concern. And they usually get back to you within 24 hours. But the State Ethics Commission is really a fabulous resource that we encourage anybody to use for any ethics concern you might have out there. They're really fabulous.
I just
And
want
if
to
you're not
add,
sure, just ask anyway.
yeah,
Sorry,
they'll
go
tell
ahead,
you
Jen.
whether or not it relates. One thing about the State Ethics Commission is that they are a law enforcement agency. So they will keep your information private as long as you're not breaking the law. And if you're breaking the law, they issue press releases on their website. So you can go back and check and see what some of those things have happened on there.
And again, just a reminder, you are not alone in this. We are all here to help. Please reach out. We do our best to make time for anybody who needs an individualized consult or anything like that. So that is up there now. So that is our spiel. For now, I will keep the screen sharing up just so people have our information for a little longer. But again, these slides will be distributed to everybody along with the recording. I will stop the recording right now, however, so that we can take some questions. Now I just need to find the recording button. Ah, no, that's the sharing button.
Mine's
do
to
it,
the
Alex.
right of share.
I'll do it. I'll stop recording.
Oh, thank you.